I'm going to make multiple videos like this over the year, similar to the videos last year where you can see my face in, which will relate to a number of subjects but looking through an esoteric lens. So I want to start off with this one, and it's going to be about the New Age movement, the history of it, but also my experiences with it as well. So, the start of the history. Now, the New Age movement came out of the CIA, MI5, and MI6 as well, and also the KGB. Now, the KGB were the secret services of communist Russia. And it's very interesting because the New Age movement ties in with what is now called cultural Marxism, which has taken over academia and the mainstream media completely. And basically deconstructs society and tries to break it down as much as possible, and has a particular agenda against Western civilization. Now, whether someone thinks that's a positive thing or a negative thing is up to them. But how this all ties into the New Age movement is that the New Age movement was created at the same time the cultural Marxists infiltrated academia and the media in around the late 1960s, which has been going on and getting more stronger and stronger up until now. So the New Age movement is not really, it's hard to kind of define it because it's not really one thing. Has lots of different sects and cults, which are all testing grounds to see what works, how much of a collectives they can build out of it, how large collectives can build out of it. And this all ties into the fact that when communism was implemented in Russia, it lacked a transcendental aspect because it was all atheistic and didn't have a spiritual dimension to it or a transcendental dimension to it. And this is why actually National Socialism in Germany was actually far more successful in many ways, because it did have that transcendental aspect to it. But National Socialism was designed to fail in order for the West to decline, to make any form of national Western pride look highly negative, and we're seeing the results of that now. So communism Russia and in China and other places in the world were all merely experiments. None of them work because they lack the transcendental aspect to it. And I think even if they did have that transcendental aspect, they wouldn't work either. But this is not what the people, these cultural Marxists, think. They think it can work. And the New Age movement is the transcendental experimentation for that. I know it's kind of largely separated from the academia and the media to an extent, but it's merely a testing ground because they haven't actually figured it out yet. They haven't actually, that's something they're still actually struggling with in this so-called bringing about this so-called New World Order. They lack the transcendental implementation. They have all the other ideas and all the other aspects in place ready to go, but this is something they haven't figured out yet. And the reason why is because they're going to have to get all these other groups of people in all these other religions to drop their religion for that one. So they're finding a way to combine all the major world religions with this new form of, you could say, religion, which is extremely difficult. And they're going to have to get masses amounts of people on it as well. It's very easy to get a small amount of people to follow something, but it's not very easy to get huge and masses amounts of people to get on board with something. There has to be something what appeals to everyone in it. And this goes into my experiences with the New Age movement. Now, my experiences with the New Age movement have been, I would say, the best word to describe it was naivety. It puts you in this very naive, almost very, very childlike way of seeing the world. And it lacks spiritual street wisdom. And this is extremely actually dangerous. Because when you're doing all these practices, and especially all this metaphysical practices, going and, say, traveling through the astral realm and stuff, and you don't have the right tools and the right mapping to know where you're going, you can get seriously fucked up and damaged. Now, my experiences, I wasn't in it for a particularly very long period of time. But while I was in there, while I was in this paradigm, looking back at it now, I can see how so easily it was to manipulate me, and how I was not using the right protocol and protection around myself in order to operate within the so-called interdimensional structure. And what I see now is how the New Age is being put into pop culture, and you've got quite more people than before getting into it, and they have no knowledge of the occult, of the occult sciences, of any form of ancestral knowledge, which you need if you're going to operate within the so-called interdimensional structures and the world of, you could say, of magic and occultism. Obviously, the New Age doesn't provide any of that. The New Age is more or less inverted Eastern philosophy brought over to the West, hybridized with Christianity, and then presented as this so-called new spirituality, this new discovered spirituality, which actually it isn't. It's just inversions of previous philosophies, spiritual philosophies, and presented as something new. It also encourages you to forget the physical and to see it as all prison. The fact is that the third dimension, the third density, is not prison. It's both the highest and lowest dimension at the same time. And when you're in this dimension, you actually have you become one of probably the most powerful entity in this part of the universe. And also there's the whole risk of getting into a so-called New Age cult, which is led by a guru, which most likely has some sort of narcissism or psychopathology running through him or her, or whatever. And they get leached out and their energy gets drained by them, and they just become completely subservient to them. Just like the so-called church has been doing for, the last over 1,000 years. And there's a difference between having a so-called guru or priest and then having a teacher or a mentor. A teacher and a mentor you need to have because there's things you need to learn from other people in order to improve yourself, because no one learned anything completely on their own. But a priest or a guru will just have you completely subservient at their feet, and basically you just become a slave. So, going into more my experiences, I can remember I was used to be meditating out in fields, and it's not like I still don't do meditation, I do. But I was inviting certain, what you could call, names of extraterrestrials down into my field. And I think at the time, obviously, I didn't feel this fucked me up, but I think it did, essentially. And I was being completely naive. Also, at this time, I had no knowledge of the occult sciences at this time, so I did not know anything, any like protocol when you're coming into communion with entities outside of yourself. And I can even remember when I was in the New Age movement, how I used to have this kind of unconditional love, but it was this false unconditional, this inverted version of it, because you can't give unconditional love to, say, someone who comes in and fucking destroys your life, can you? I mean, it's lacking simple common sense there. Unconditional love is real, and you can still have it, but you shouldn't just, give it to people who don't deserve it, quite frankly. And I can remember for about a whole week or 2 weeks, I was in this complete state of unconditional love, wherein if someone came over to me and, I don't know, hit me directly right in the face, I would have gone up to them and hugged them. This is the level of absolutely disconnecting with the reality I was in. This is also a time when I was, starting to wake up to the conspiracy stuff, what was going on. And at this time, I wasn't so much in a state of, well, at the very beginning of discovering, I was in a state of fear, but I kind of even had, this infinite love for the people that were causing this so-called global conspiracy. What I'm saying here is that it's important to fucking ground yourself. Because if you don't ground yourself and keep your roots connected to the earth, then you'll just fucking go flying off into, you know, another world and exist there, but you're not supposed to exist there. If you are a human being here in the 3D physical, then you're meant to be connected directly to the earth. And the New Age rejects all that. And then when they do talk about it, it's all this kind of very pseudo-nonsense about it, which kind of injects itself into neo-paganism. But doesn't really explain the depth of actually what the importance of connecting to the physical earth is, and just how much we rely on it. We're not supposed to go and, you know, go to other planets and live there. We're supposed to stay here. And of course, you know, I travel through other dimensions to other worlds and stuff, but my home is always here. I stay most of the time here, on Midgard. And when I started to realise that the New Age was basically a load of shit, I moved into going down the left-hand path and into Luciferianism, which I'll get into another video about. And there was experiences I had when I was in the New Age, or just coming out of it, that completely just diminished that paradigm, because I came to face and looked into the eye of evil. And from since then, I knew what fucking evil was. And that you can't even be in that philosophy, that New Age philosophy, after you know actually what evil is, and once you look into the fucking eyes of it. And because the New Age says there is no good or evil. And I completely understand that dualism is a product of monotheism. But good and evil isn't really dualism in the way people think it is. That there is such things as good and evil in this world. And it is the actions that we take that manifest as us either going towards the path of good or towards the path of evil. And this is not anything really to do with the left-hand path or the right-hand path, as it goes much more deeper than that. That's all I really wanted to say for now. Speak to you next time.